The flashing red and blue lights painted the cul-de-sac like a crime scene. Neighbors peered from their windows, whispering, phones recording. At the center of it all, Malik stood calm, hands in his pockets, as 3 officers surrounded him. "Sir, they said you're trespassing." The lead cop barked. Malik's gaze didn't flinch. "Trespassing, on my own land." Behind them, the HOA president Karen Whitmore stood smug, arms crossed, pearls gleaming in the afternoon sun. "I warned you," she sneered. "No one builds here without HOA approval." The cop turned back to Malik. "You have proof this property's yours." Malik's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Oh, I've got more than proof," he said, pulling out a folded document. The street went silent. Even Karen's smirk began to fade as he unfolded the paper. "This isn't your HOA anymore," he said, "because I just bought it, every inch of it." The crowd gasped, the cops froze. And Karen's face turned pale as the man she tried to arrest became her new landlord. Fade to black. Title appears. You never know who you're messing with. The sirens faded, but the tension didn't. Neighbors whispered behind half. Closed blinds, phone still recording. Karen stood frozen at the edge of the driveway, face drained of color. Her voice cracked as she finally spoke. You're lying. This house belongs to the association. You can't just..." Malik reached into his coat pocket, calm as ever, and pulled out a crisp white folder. The embossed seal caught the sunlight. Title transfer, county, verified, foreclosure auction from 2 weeks ago. You might want to check who signed the last notice. Karen snatched the paper with trembling hands. Her eyes darted from line to line, faster and faster, until the truth hit her like a punch. Her name was gone. The house she ruled from, the one she used to host meetings, issue fines, and threaten neighbors from, wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to Malik Patterson, the man she just called the cops on. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. One cleared his throat. "Ma'am, looks like he's right. Deed's legitimate." Karen's voice rose again, desperate now. "This is a mistake. He must have forged it. I want him off my property." But the younger cop stepped forward, shaking his head. "Ma'am, this is his property now." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Malik's gaze never wavered. His voice was low but sharp as glass. "You tried to evict me from my own land. You called the cops, humiliated me in front of your little kingdom, and yet, here we are." Karen stumbled back, her heels scraping against the driveway. Her voice trembled. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Malik smiled slightly. Cold, tired, victorious. "Oh, I'm counting on it. Because you've made this neighborhood a battlefield for years. And I'm not here to move in, Karen. I'm here to clean it up." The crowd outside gasped. For the first time, the queen of the HOA looked small. Malik turned to the officers. "Gentlemen, she's trespassing now. Please escort her off my property." It was poetic justice. Immediate, undeniable. The same police she once used as her personal enforcers were now walking her down her own driveway, toward her own car, past the same neighbors she once fined for unsightly trash bins. Cameras flashed. Whispers turned to cheers. Karen's face twisted with humiliation as she tried to hold her head high, and Malik, he didn't gloat, he didn't laugh, he just stood there, silent, the calm after the storm. When her car finally disappeared down the street, Malik looked at the shattered HOA president, sign lying in the grass. He picked it up, brushed off the dust, and said softly, "Let's start rebuilding this neighborhood the right way." But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Because Karen Whitman wasn't the type to surrender quietly, and behind her perfect suburban smile, something darker was already stirring. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Malik's phone started buzzing non-stop. Emails, letters, notifications. He opened the first one: notice of violation, unauthorized structure on property, then another fine for improper landscaping, and another 30, 2 violations in one night. Malik leaned back in disbelief. The ink on his property deed was barely dry, and Karen was already striking back. He glanced outside his living room window, and there she was, Karen Whitman. Standing on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered across her face like nothing ever happened. She wore sunglasses even though the sky was still cloudy, and behind her, 2 HOA volunteers followed, jotting notes like obedient soldiers. Malik stepped outside slowly, calm but cold. Morning, Karen. You must be lost. The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction here anymore. Karen smirked. Oh, but it does. You see, just because you own the property doesn't mean you're free from community regulations. Malik crossed his arms. Regulations, you're harassing me. She took a slow step closer, her perfume sharp in the morning air. Call it whatever you want. The board met last night, emergency session. We've decided to classify your renovations as non-compliant. Also, your fence color violates community aesthetic standards. He blinked. Karen, it's the same fence you approved for the last owner. Karen's smirk deepened. Exactly, the last owner. Malik could feel the anger bubbling, but he held it down. He knew her game. She wasn't just angry, she was trying to break him. Tell me something, he said quietly. How far are you willing to go just to feel powerful again? She didn't answer, just turned to her clipboard and wrote something down. Her voice was cold. Power doesn't need permission, Mr. Patterson. It enforces the rules. She turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete, but Malik called out after her, Careful, Karen, you're building a wall so high, one day you won't see who's climbing over it. She paused for a second, her smile flickered, then she walked away. By afternoon, things escalated. Malik's contractors refused to work. They'd been contacted by the HOA, threatened with legal issues. If they continued building on his property, even the trash collection stopped. Karen's influence ran deep. The same neighbors who once smiled now avoided eye contact. Cars slowed as they passed his home, taking pictures, whispering. She'd turned the whole neighborhood into a weapon. That evening, Malik sat alone on his porch, watching the sunset bleed through the trees. He wasn't angry anymore, he was calculating. He called someone. Jason, it's me. I need the meeting minutes from the last HOA session. Every file, every note, and Jason. Make sure Karen doesn't know who's asking. Jason hesitated on the other end. Man, that's risky. You really want to go after her. Malik's tone was ice. I don't start wars, Jason, but I finish them. Across town, Karen sat at her glass dining table surrounded by files. The room was pristine, candles lit, music low, wine half empty, but her mind was chaos. Her husband, Robert, stood at the doorway watching her pace. You need to stop this, Karen. You lost the house. Just move on. She spun around, fury in her eyes. Move on? Do you have any idea what people are saying? That I got kicked out by him? That I abused power? I built this neighborhood. I made it what it is. Robert sighed. You made it a prison, Karen. She glared at him, silent for a long second, then whispered, If he thinks he can ruin me, he's wrong. Nobody humiliates me and gets away with it. That night, Malik's investigator sent him a file. Dozens of documents, HOA financials, fraudulent fines, falsified reports. And right there, in black and white, Karen Whitman's signature repeated again and again. She hadn't just broken rules. She'd built an empire out of them. Malik exhaled slowly. This isn't about a house anymore, he muttered. This is about corruption. He looked out the window. Karen's house across the street was dark. But somewhere in that darkness, he knew she wasn't done yet. And neither was he, because in this neighborhood, every secret had a price, and Malik was ready to pay it just to see the queen finally fall. Rain hammered the windows that night as Malik sat in his office, the glow of his computer screen lighting up the room. His eyes were sharp, unblinking. Dozens of documents sprawled across his desk, invoices, receipts, HOA bylaws. Every one of them traced back to one name, Karen Whitman. He clicked on a file labeled Annual Financial Report. The numbers didn't add up, not even close. Tens of thousands missing, fake vendors, suspicious consulting fees. He whispered to himself, You've been stealing from your own community. His phone buzzed. It was Jason again, the quiet HOA treasurer who'd risked his job to help him. Malik, Jason said nervously, I sent everything I could find, but you didn't get this from me. She's been snooping around. She suspects something. Malik's tone was calm, but there was fire in his eyes. She should suspect, because I'm done playing defense. He hung up, opened his recorder, and started drafting a plan. The next morning, Malik drove through the neighborhood, noting every house with unpaid dues marked as current in Karen's reports. Every homeowner she favored, everyone she punished, the pattern was clear control through favoritism and fear. As he passed Karen's house, he noticed something strange. A black sedan sat parked across the street, engine idling. The driver's sunglasses, no expression, watched him. Malik slowed, his eyes narrowing. "Not subtle, Karen," he muttered. When he pulled into his driveway, he found a letter taped to his door. Typed, "Anonymous, you're making a mistake. Walk away before she destroys you too." He tore it off, crumpled it, and walked inside. Later that evening, he met Jason at a quiet diner outside town. Rain drummed on the windows, thunder rolling in the distance. Jason slid into the booth, pale, shaking slightly. "Man, I shouldn't even be here. Karen's got eyes everywhere." Malik leaned forward. "Tell me what you found." Jason looked around, then pulled out a small USB drive wrapped in a napkin. This is the board's internal folder. Everything. Meeting notes, transfers, even voice memos. She records herself sometimes, bragging about it. Malik raised an eyebrow. She records herself committing crimes. Jason gave a weak laugh. Karen's not afraid of anyone. She thinks she's untouchable. Malik took the drive, his jaw tightening. Not anymore. But as he pocketed it, Jason grabbed his wrist. "You don't understand, Malik. There's something else. She's got people in the county office, the zoning department, even a cop or two. She can twist anything to her advantage." Malik's expression didn't change. "Then I'll twist it back." Jason shook his head, terrified. "You're not hearing me. You go after her wrong and you'll end up in jail before she does." Malik stood, tossing some bills on the table. "Then I better not go after her wrong." He left Jason sitting there nervous, sweating, watching Malik disappear into the storm. Back home, Malik plugged in the USB. Dozens of folders opened on his screen. Audio files labeled with dates. He clicked one. Karen's voice filled the room, cold, commanding, dripping with arrogance. "Find them all. Anyone who questions me gets a violation. The board exists to serve me. They forget that, I'll remind them." Then laughter. Then silence. Malik's expression hardened. "This is it." He copied the files, backed them up 3 times, and sent one to his lawyer with a single message. "If anything happens to me, release everything." Across the street, Karen sat in her car, watching through binoculars. She'd seen Jason leave the diner. She'd seen Malik drive home. She knew something was changing, and she didn't like it. Her phone buzzed. "Is it done?" she asked. A deep voice on the other end replied, "It will be. Tomorrow morning, his property gets cited for trespassing and illegal occupancy. We'll make him the problem." Karen smiled faintly, eyes glinting in the dark. "That's what I like to hear." She ended the call, took a long sip of her wine, and whispered, "Let's see how you like being the villain, Mr. Landlord." The next morning, Malik woke up to pounding on his door. 3 police officers stood outside, flashing badges. "Sir, we received a report that you're illegally occupying this property. We need you to come with us." Malik stared, calm but cold. "Who filed it?" One officer hesitated. "The HOA." Malik gave a small, almost amused smile. "Of course they did." He stepped aside slowly. "Gentlemen, before you cuff me, I think you'll want to see this." He turned his laptop toward them, hit play. Karen's voice filled the room crystal clear. "Make his life hell. Call in the favors. If the cops have to drag him out, so be it." The officers froze. Silence. Malik looked them dead in the eye. "Still think I'm trespassing." Outside, a car door slammed. Karen stepped out, pretending to be shocked, camera crew in tow. "Oh, officers, is everything okay? We received so many complaints from concerned residents." Her words stopped mid-sentence as she saw the laptop screen through the doorway. Her own voice echoing back at her. Her face went pale. Malik stepped forward, holding the door open. "Karen, come on in. Since you love recording everything, maybe you'll want a copy of this one too." The cops exchanged looks. One of them slowly reached for his radio. This just became an internal affairs case. Karen's lips trembled. You don't know who you're dealing with." Malik's tone was calm, steady, lethal. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The problem is now the whole county will too." That moment hung in the air like a storm about to break, and for the first time, the queen of the HOA looked powerless, but what Malik didn't know was that Karen still had one last card to play, and it was the kind that could destroy everything he'd built. The next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing, phones were blowing up. Group chats, Facebook posts, and whispered calls filled the air with the same question, "Did you hear about Karen?" Clips of her voice memo had leaked online. The smug laughter, the arrogance make his life hell. It spread like wildfire. By noon, every resident had seen it, and for the first time, the HOA queen was losing her crown. But Karen Whitman wasn't the kind of woman who surrendered. She didn't panic. She planned. In her spotless marble kitchen, she poured herself a drink and watched the local news playing the leaked recording. They were calling it the HOA scandal of the year. Her reflection glimmered in the glass window as she whispered to herself, "They think I'm done. They have no idea who they're dealing with." She grabbed her phone, dialed a number, and waited. A familiar deep voice answered. "Ma'am, change of plan," she said, pacing the floor. "We go on offense. I want every piece of dirt you can find on him, property records, old tenants, lawsuits, taxes, anything. If there's no fire, make smoke." The man hesitated. "And if there's nothing to make?" Karen's eyes darkened. "Then create it." That night, Malik sat by his desk again, exhaustion etched into his face. His laptop screen glowed with headlines, messages, articles, everyone talking about Karen's downfall. Jason had texted him earlier. "You did it, man. She's finished." But Malik didn't celebrate. He'd lived long enough to know that people like Karen didn't break easily. They bent the truth until it fit them again. And deep down, he could feel it this wasn't over. 2 days later, it began. A sudden knock at his door. When Malik opened it, 2 county inspectors stood there, clipboards in hand. "Mr. Malik, we've received multiple reports about unlicensed renovations on your property. We'll need to take a look around." Malik frowned. "I didn't file for any renovations." One inspector checked his file. "It says here you did. Permit application, approved and signed by you." He scanned the document. Fake signature, fake application. Karen's game was in motion. "Fine." Malik said calmly, "Come in. You won't find anything." They didn't. But the next day, the story broke online. Local landlord caught operating illegal home business, HOA president vindicated. Fake news, paid blogs, doctored screenshots. Karen had struck back, and this time she was aiming for his reputation. Malik slammed his laptop shut, frustration boiling in his chest. His lawyer tried calling, but he ignored it. Instead, he grabbed his keys and drove straight to City Hall. The parking lot was half empty, the sky dim with rain clouds. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Malik approached the records counter. "I need to speak to the zoning manager," he said. The clerk hesitated. "She's in a meeting." Malik leaned in. "Then tell her it's about fraud. HOA-level fraud." Within minutes, a tall woman in a gray suit appeared, cautious but curious. "Mr. Malik, you said fraud." "Yes, someone filed permits under my name. I think an HOA president is behind it." The woman frowned, checking her screen. "There's no record of a permit request under your property this month." Malik froze, "But I saw it. The inspectors had paperwork." She shook her head. "Then they weren't from our office." A chill ran down his spine. "Who sent them?" he whispered. Meanwhile, in Karen's house, a storm of a different kind was brewing. Stacks of papers covered her dining table, altered bank statements, photoshopped emails, and voice clips edited to sound like Malik threatening her. She sat at the head of the table, sipping coffee, while 2 men, her consultants, worked silently with their laptops. "Make it convincing," she said coldly. "The goal isn't to prove he's guilty. It's to make people believe he could be." One of them looked up. "You want this to hit the news or just the HOA board?" Karen smiled faintly. "Both. The board votes next week. If I'm going down, I'm taking him with me first." That night, Malik returned home to flashing lights. Police cars. A crowd of neighbors gathered across the street, phones raised, whispering. His heart sank. A female officer stepped forward. "Mr. Malik, we have a warrant to search your property. There's been a complaint filed alleged harassment, threats, and financial misconduct." "By who?" he asked quietly, though he already knew. The officer flipped her notepad. "Karen Whitman." They searched everything. Every drawer, every box, every device. And then one of the officers emerged from his office holding a thick envelope. Inside printed cash receipts, HOA meeting notes, and an unsigned letter claiming Malik had paid off a board member to release confidential information. He stared at it, stunned. He'd never seen those papers before. Karen had planted evidence. Hours later, Malik sat alone in the cold interrogation room at the local precinct. The hum of the overhead light was the only sound. Across from him sat Detective Harris, calm, analytical, and too familiar with Karen's type. "Look, Malik," the detective said, "you're not the first guy she's gone after, but this time she came prepared. She's got statements, screenshots, even financials. If I didn't know better, I'd say she built this months ago." Malik leaned forward. "So you do know better?" Harris hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Off the record, yes, but I need proof, something real, something she can't twist." Malik thought of the USB drive, the original files, the recordings, everything. They were safe, hidden, but now he realized it wasn't enough. Karen wasn't fighting for truth. She was fighting for control, and to beat her, he'd need to expose not just her words, but her entire network. Across town, Karen sat in her car, watching the news play out on her dashboard screen. HOA president claims harassment by local landlord. The headline glowed as the anchor described her as a beloved community leader under attack. She smiled. Then her phone buzzed a message from a blocked number. "You've gone too far, Karen." She stared at it for a moment, her smirk fading. "You think you can scare me?" She typed back. "We'll see who's scared when this is over." She hit send, but this time, no reply came. Just silence, the kind that settles in before something big breaks. The next morning, Malik received an envelope on his doorstep. Inside, an old HOA ledger, dated 3 years before Karen became president. And in the corner, a name he didn't recognize. J. Whitman, treasurer, Karen's late husband. There were handwritten notes, financial transactions, and unexplained missing dues written in red pen. A realization hit him like lightning. Karen hadn't built this empire alone. She'd inherited it and the cover-up that came with it. The real story was deeper than corruption. It was legacy, and Malik was about to tear it apart. Rain had fallen all night, washing the dust off the neighborhood but not its sins. By morning, the streets shimmered under pale light, puddles reflecting the identical white fences and manicured lawns. Everything looked peaceful, but inside Malik's house, war was being prepared. He stood in front of his board, dozens of papers pinned across it, property deeds, payment slips, HOA bylaws, and screenshots from the old ledger he had just discovered. Each line connected to another with red thread. At the center of it all, Karen Whitman. Her late husband's handwriting was clear in the ledger. Transfers, missing funds, adjusted dues, and signatures that suddenly stopped 3 months before his accident. Malik leaned closer, muttering under his breath, "You didn't just take the title, Karen. You buried the truth." He grabbed his phone, recording every page, every note. If she'd built her empire on fraud, he'd burn it down with facts. Meanwhile, across the street, Karen stood before her bathroom mirror, perfecting her reflection. Her face looked flawless, but her eyes betrayed fatigue, sleepless nights spent controlling a lie that was beginning to unravel. The HOA board meeting was tonight. She'd called it early, pretending it was to address recent controversies. In reality, she was planning a final performance, a show of control before everything slipped away. "Smile, Karen," she told herself, fixing her lipstick. Control the room, control the story. But deep down, for the first time in years, she was scared. Evening arrived like a slow build in a movie, thunder rolling in the distance, lights glowing through living room windows, tension hidden behind polite chatter. The HOA clubhouse was packed, every seat filled, every resident present. Dozens of eyes watched as Karen took the stage, clipboard in hand, confident smile masking chaos beneath. She began her speech calmly. "Good evening, everyone. I know there have been rumors circulating about me and about our community. I want to clear things up once and for all." Her voice was steady, practiced, but Malik could see the tremor in her hand. He stood in the back row, silent, waiting. Karen continued, "A certain individual has tried to discredit me, spreading lies, manipulating records, and creating a false narrative to make himself look like the victim. I trusted this man, I helped him, and he betrayed this neighborhood." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others exchanged uncertain glances. Then Karen motioned to her assistant, who handed her a folder. She raised it dramatically. "These," she declared, "are financial documents proving that this man used HOA property for personal gain." She opened the folder, but inside there were no doctored files, no forged letters, just one sheet of paper, a single printed screenshot, the voice memo. Her face went pale. It was the same recording that ruined her reputation, her own words. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Karen froze. "Wait, this isn't the right file." And that's when Malik stepped forward, looking for this, he said, holding up a flash drive. The projector screen behind her suddenly flickered to life, showing images, ledgers, and scanned documents from the old HOA archives. Gasps filled the room. Malik's voice cut through the noise. "Karen Whitman isn't just guilty of harassment and corruption. She's been hiding financial crimes that began before she was even president, crimes tied to her late husband, the former treasurer. This isn't a feud. This is an empire built on theft." Karen spun around, furious. "You have no proof." Malik clicked again. The next slide appeared, bank statements showing money routed from the HOA fund to J. Whitman Construction, a shell company registered under her husband's name and later hers. The crowd erupted. A board member stood up. "Karen, is this true? You said those records were lost." Karen's mask cracked. "Those records were forged. He's manipulating you." Malik didn't flinch. "Really? Then how do you explain the ledger with your husband's signature and your handwriting in red ink, adjusting the dues after his death?" For the first time, Karen's lips trembled. She looked around the room. No one was on her side anymore. The same neighbors who once followed her every word now stared at her like strangers. One woman whispered loudly, "She made me pay triple dues last year." Another said, "She threatened to tow my car because I parked 2 inches over the line." Voices rose, louder and louder, until it became chaos. Karen snapped. "Enough," she screamed, slamming the clipboard onto the podium. "You think this man cares about this neighborhood? He's a manipulator, an outsider. He doesn't belong here." But as she shouted, Malik quietly stepped closer to the microphone. His voice was calm, steady, controlled. "I belong anywhere the truth does." The room went silent. Karen's breath hitched. She took a step back, eyes darting wildly. "No, you can't do this to me." But it was already done. The board president turned toward the audience. "By majority vote," he said slowly, "Karen Whitman is hereby removed as HOA president, effective immediately." Gasps again, but this time Karen didn't speak. Her power gone. She stood frozen, eyes locked on Malik, her entire empire collapsing in front of her. Security officers escorted her out, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. The storm outside had begun again, rain pounding on the windows like a final verdict. Malik stepped outside minutes later, standing under the awning, breathing in the cold air. For the first time in weeks, he felt peace, not victory, not triumph, just quiet peace. Jason approached him. "You really did it, man." Malik shook his head. "No, she did it to herself." Jason smiled. "Still, you turned the whole neighborhood upside down." Malik looked up at the dark sky. "Sometimes," he said softly, "you have to tear down a house to rebuild it right." But just as he was about to leave, a car screeched to a halt at the corner of the street. Karen stepped out, soaked from the rain, mascara streaked, fury burning in her eyes. "You think you've won," she shouted across the street. "This isn't over. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." Malik stared at her, silent. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket and held up a folded piece of paper. It was a court order, actually. He said, his voice low but firm, "It is. As of this morning, the property you live on and this entire neighborhood is under new ownership." Her eyes widened. "What?" Malik stepped closer, rain glistening on his coat. I told you I wasn't part of your HOA. You never asked why. He unfolded the paper, a deed transfer, signed, sealed, and recorded. I bought the land at auction last week. The bank foreclosed on the HOA when your accounts didn't match the tax records. Karen froze, trembling. No, that's impossible. Malik smiled faintly. Welcome to your new landlord's neighborhood, Karen. For a long moment, there was only rain falling between them, soft but final. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Her umbrella dropped, spinning on the ground as thunder rolled across the sky. Malik turned and walked away, leaving her standing there powerless for the first time in her life. The camera would have panned up if this were a film over the flooded street, the streetlights flickering, the broken queen standing alone under the storm she created. And just like that, the fall of the queen was complete. The next morning, the neighborhood was silent. No leaf blowers, no sprinklers, no dogs barking. Just silence, the kind that follows after an explosion. Karen's name was on every phone in the community. Screenshots of the meeting had gone viral overnight. Clips of her shouting, the documents on the projector all over social media. The queen of control had become a meme. In the quiet of her once pristine kitchen, Karen sat alone at the counter. Her phone kept buzzing with messages, but she didn't look. She just stared at the steaming coffee in her mug untouched. Her reflection in the dark surface looked foreign. Eyes swollen from tears, hair out of place, lipstick faded. For a woman who built her life around perfection, it was unbearable. Suddenly, a knock rattled the door. She flinched. Go away, she muttered, but the knocking came again, harder this time. Mrs. Whitman. A man's voice said, "Open up, it's urgent." She hesitated, then cracked the door open just enough to see the uniform. A deputy marshal. "Ma'am, I'm here to deliver a notice of eviction. The property has changed ownership." He handed her a sealed envelope. Karen's hands trembled as she tore it open. Her name was there, but beneath it, the new owner's signature read, Malik Patterson. Her knees went weak. "This is my home." She whispered, "You can't, ma'am. You have 72 hours to vacate." The deputy's tone was professional, but his eyes showed pity. "Please contact your legal representative." He turned to leave, but Karen stepped out onto the porch, voice cracking. "This is my house. My husband built this. You can't take it from me." The deputy sighed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The records say otherwise." Then he left, boots splashing through puddles, leaving her standing barefoot on the cold concrete. Rain began to fall again, slow at first, then steady. Karen didn't move. For years, she'd controlled every neighbor, every meeting, every blade of grass that dared to grow out of line, and now she couldn't even control the sky. Across the street, Malik watched quietly through the blinds. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He just stood there, motionless. Jason entered from behind. She got the notice. Malik nodded. "Yeah." Jason crossed his arms. "Man, you really turned the tables on her." Malik stayed silent for a long moment. Then he said softly, "You know what's funny? I don't feel like I won anything." Jason frowned. "You exposed her, saved half the neighborhood, and took down a corrupt HOA. That's a win." Malik exhaled. "It's not about her. It's about what people allowed her to become. Everyone looked the other way until it was too late." "This isn't victory, Jason. It's a warning." Jason nodded slowly. "Still, you did what nobody else could." Malik looked out the window again. "She's not done yet. People like her, they don't surrender. They scheme." And he was right. That same night, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the empty HOA office. Karen had broken in, flashlight in hand, hair soaked from the rain, eyes wild. She moved through the dark hallways barefoot, clutching her husband's old briefcase. "Come on, it has to be here somewhere," she whispered. She rifled through drawers, boxes, filing cabinets until she found it. A small, rusted safe in the back of the storage closet. She dropped to her knees, punching in an old code. The lock clicked open. Inside, papers. Old deeds, financial statements, and a sealed envelope with her husband's initials. J. W. She opened it, hands trembling. Inside was a letter, dated 2 weeks before his accident. "Karen, if you're reading this, it means the truth caught up with us. I told you to stop. You didn't listen. You've turned this neighborhood into a kingdom, and yourself into its queen. But when the walls fall, don't say I didn't warn you. I'm sorry for everything." Tears rolled down her face, splattering onto the ink. "Why didn't you stop me?" she whispered. "Why did you leave me to do this alone?" The room felt smaller, her breath quickened, and then headlights flashed through the window. A car had pulled up. Karen froze, peering through the blinds. It was Malik's black SUV. He stepped out, holding a folder under his arm. Calm, quiet, deliberate. Karen panicked, shoving the documents back into the safe and slamming it shut. She hid behind the counter as he walked in. "Karen," Malik said softly, his voice echoing in the empty room, "you shouldn't be here." She slowly rose from behind the desk, face half in shadow. "You took everything from me," Malik sighed. "No, you took it from yourself." Her voice rose. "You think you're the hero here. You think buying this land makes you better than me. I think doing the right thing makes me different from you." Karen's hands clenched. "You humiliated me in front of my friends, my neighbors, my husband's legacy. He built that legacy on lies," Malik said firmly. "You just inherited them." For a moment, they just stared at each other, two lives that had collided, wrecked, and reshaped by pride and pain. Then Malik said quietly, "You need to let this go." Karen laughed bitterly. "Let go? You destroyed everything I built." Malik shook his head. "I didn't destroy it. I exposed it." Silence, only the rain tapping on the roof. Karen's voice broke. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be invisible? To have everything taken from you, and the only way to survive is to control what little you have left." Malik looked at her and for a brief second saw not a villain, but a broken woman trapped inside her own kingdom. He said softly, "You could have just been kind." Her eyes filled with tears, but then her jaw tightened again. "You'll regret this," she said, turning away. "People like me don't disappear." Malik stared at her for a long moment before walking toward the door. "Then I guess we'll see who the neighborhood remembers," he said, and stepped out into the rain. Karen stood there, shaking, staring at the door he'd closed behind him. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating her face, grief, rage, fear, all tangled into one. And then she turned to the safe again, this time not to protect what was inside but to destroy it. She poured gasoline from a maintenance can across the floor. The smell filled the air. She whispered to herself, "If I can't have it, no one will." She lit a match. The camera would slow as she dropped it. The flame touched the gas, and the fire raced across the floor like a living creature. Outside, Malik was halfway down the steps when he saw the light orange flicker behind the glass. "Karen," he shouted, running back. The explosion was deafening. The building erupted in flames, glass shattering outward, smoke pouring into the rain-soaked night. Malik covered his face from the blast, coughing, eyes stinging. He ran toward the door, kicked it open, and found her collapsed by the desk, coughing violently. He grabbed her arm. "Karen, get up." She struggled, weak, dazed. "I didn't mean for it to end like this," she whispered. He pulled her out as the ceiling began to collapse. They burst through the front door just as the fire truck sirens echoed down the street. Karen lay on the grass, soaked, trembling, watching her empire burn. The flames reflected in her eyes, orange, wild, unstoppable. Malik stood beside her, breathing hard, watching too. She turned to him, voice breaking. "You should have just let me fall quietly." Malik shook his head. "You didn't build anything worth saving." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just stared at the fire, her kingdom turning to ash, and with a voice barely audible over the storm, she said, "I used to think control was power. Now I know it's just fear in disguise." The firefighters rushed past, the flames lighting up the sky. Neighbors came out in robes and umbrellas, whispering, filming. The same community she once ruled now watched her final downfall. Malik turned to leave. Karen whispered one last thing. "Why did you save me?" He paused. "Because even when someone's wrong, they still deserve a chance to see what right looks like." Then he walked away, his figure fading into the flashing red lights and rain. Karen lay there, motionless, the fire dancing in her eyes. For the first time, she wasn't the president. She wasn't the queen. She was just human, and the reckoning had come. The night had barely settled when flashing red and blue lights tore through the silence. Police cars skidded to a stop in front of the property, tires grinding against gravel. Karen stood near the gate, arms folded, trying to look composed, but her lips trembled. The man she once mocked, the one she called a trespasser, now stood tall, hands in pockets, waiting. "Ma'am, we've had several complaints from this address," the officer said as he stepped out, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "Care to explain why you're on private property past curfew?" Karen's voice cracked. "Private property? This is my community. That man, he's trespassing." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, this land was sold in a foreclosure auction 2 weeks ago, according to the deed." He glanced at the man. "He's the legal owner now." Karen blinked. The color drained from her face. "No, that's impossible. I built this place. My HOA, your HOA," the man interrupted calmly, "was registered under the previous ownership. It no longer exists, which means—" He took a slow step closer, eyes cold as steel. "You're the one trespassing." The officers exchanged glances. "Sir, do you want to press charges?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the house she once ruled from the one where she fined people for grass height and mailbox color. His voice dropped. "No charges, yet. But if she sets foot here again, I'll consider it." Karen's shoulders slumped. The neighbors had come out again, phones recording. For years, she'd been their nightmare, threatening, controlling, acting like a queen. But now, she was just another face caught under flashing lights. One of the neighbors whispered, "That's what happens when you think power means ownership." The man heard it. He didn't smile, but his jaw eased. "Power's never about control." He said quietly, "It's about respect. Something you can't buy or bully your way into." As Karen was escorted off the property, she glanced back. He stood framed by the headlights, calm, unshaken, like a man who had waited years for this moment. Inside, he walked to the living room window, the same one Karen once looked through to watch others obey her rules. He whispered almost to himself, "Welcome home." Outside, the HOA sign was taken down by dawn, and by morning a new one stood in its place. "Private property, respect lives here." The same neighbors who once feared Karen now greeted him with coffee and quiet gratitude. For them, the storm had finally passed. But for him, it was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming peace and proving that dignity doesn't shout. It simply stands, unshaken. The story wasn't just about land or law. It was about balance, how sometimes life flips the script when you least expect it, and those who abuse power learn what it feels like to stand beneath it. He looked at the sunrise and smiled faintly. "Funny," he murmured, "they called the cops on me, and in the end, I was the one who set them free." The camera would fade here, a bright suburban dawn, warm golden light over quiet homes, the wind softly tugging at the new sign, "Respect lives here." The next morning, sunlight spilled across the quiet neighborhood. For the first time in years, the street was peaceful, no warning letters taped to doors. No shouting from Karen's porch. No arguments about lawn heights or mailbox colors. Only the hum of sprinklers and the chirping of birds filled the air. But for Karen, peace was a stranger now. She sat in the back of a patrol car parked outside her old office, hands trembling. Her once perfect hair hung loose, her sunglasses gone. The confident smirk she wore like armor had cracked. Reporters had gathered, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions she couldn't answer. "Mrs. Parker, is it true you falsified HOA documents? Did you know the property was sold weeks before you called the cops? Do you have any comment on the eviction order?" She didn't speak. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Inside the house she once ruled, the new landlord, the man she had accused, insulted, and humiliated, stood before a group of neighbors. They had gathered quietly, unsure whether to thank him or fear him. He broke the silence first. "I didn't buy this place for revenge," he said, his tone calm but heavy. "I bought it to stop people like her from thinking power means cruelty. You don't need to control people to have respect. You earn it." An elderly neighbor stepped forward, voice trembling. "We were scared of her. Every week, new fines, new threats. We wanted to fight back, but nobody wanted to make it worse." The man nodded. "Fear is how she kept control, but fear only lasts until truth shows up." He looked around the room, his gaze sharp and steady. And truth, he said, is finally here. Outside, Karen was released on bail. She stormed toward the gate, eyes blazing with resentment. You think this is over, she shouted. You can't erase me from this community. He didn't even turn to face her. I don't need to, he said. You erased yourself. Her jaw clenched. You'll regret this. I'll find a way. Enough. He interrupted sharply. That's your problem. You think life is about finding ways to win. It's not. It's about finding ways to change. For a moment, she froze. His words hit harder than any fine or lawsuit ever could. She looked around the neighbors she once commanded, now staring back in quiet disappointment. The HOA sign was gone. Her name was gone. Her power gone. A single tear slipped down her cheek, though she tried to hide it. I was just trying to keep things perfect. She whispered. He sighed. Perfection doesn't exist, Karen. Humanity does. You lost sight of that. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone, a queen without a kingdom, surrounded by the ruins of her own rules. As he entered his new home, the sun poured through the windows, golden and alive. He paused, running his hand along the polished table where Karen once held HOA meetings. Strange, he murmured, how power always finds its way back to truth. The camera would pan slowly across the neighborhood, kids riding bikes, neighbors talking freely, laughter echoing where silence once ruled. The world felt lighter now, but as the screen faded, Karen's figure appeared once more, sitting in her car, staring at the for sale signs that lined her old street. Her reflection in the mirror looked tired, defeated, but behind the sadness, a flicker of something else glimmered. Regret, maybe, or realization. The man's voice played over the final shot. Some people never learn until they lose everything they tried to control, but when they finally do, maybe that's when they start to change. The music swells. The final scene shows the sunrise reflecting on the sign again. Private property, respect lives here. And the camera slowly zooms out, quiet, hopeful, and full of meaning. It had been 3 days since Karen's world came crashing down. 3 long, silent, unbearable days. Her house, the one she ruled like a castle, was no longer hers. Her name had been stripped from the HOA records. Her voice silenced in every meeting. The neighborhood group chat she used to dominate. Muted, deleted, forgotten, but Karen Parker was not the kind of woman who vanished quietly. No, she was the kind who burned bridges, then built new ones from the ashes. Late that night, she sat alone in her car, engine off, watching from across the street. The new landlord's house glowed warmly under the porch lights. People were laughing inside, neighbors who once bowed to her now sitting comfortably in his living room. Her jaw clenched. They forgot me that fast, she muttered. After everything I did for them. Her reflection in the mirror looked sharp, haunted. The same woman who once held power over everyone now looked like a ghost haunting her own legacy. Then she saw a folder in the passenger seat. Labeled in thick black marker, HOA Confidential Property Records. She smiled coldly. You think you've won, don't you? She whispered. But I still have secrets, and secrets are power. She stepped out of the car, her heels crunching on the gravel. The street was quiet except for the rustle of trees in the cold night air. She moved like a shadow, slipping past the gate, down the walkway, toward the side of the house. Inside, the landlord Marcus sat in the living room, sipping tea. The laughter had faded. The last guests had just left. He leaned back, finally breathing easy, but a faint noise caught his ear. A creak from the back door. He froze. Setting the cup down quietly, he moved toward the kitchen, hand instinctively brushing against the side table where his badge and gun lay. Years in law enforcement had taught him one thing: peace never lasts forever. He flipped the light switch. Karen stood there, caught mid-step, folder in hand. The silence between them was heavy, electric. What are you doing here? His voice was calm, but edged with warning. Karen lifted her chin, her old arrogance flashing back. Retrieving what's mine, yours, he scoffed. You broke into my house. You stole my community, she snapped. You don't belong here. None of this belongs to you. He took a step closer. You mean the same community you terrorized for years? The one you fined for leaving a trash can out an hour late. Her eyes flared. I was maintaining order. No, he said, his voice deepening. You were maintaining control. She slammed the folder on the counter. Papers spilled across the surface: contracts, deeds, records. These prove you manipulated the auction. She spat. You used inside information to take over. I can destroy you with this. Marcus glanced at the papers, then back at her. Those are fake, aren't they? Karen hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. He smirked. You forged HOA documents again. You never learn. Her breathing quickened. No one will believe you, she hissed. Maybe not, he said, pulling out his phone, but they'll believe the footage. Karen's eyes widened. She turned. A tiny red light blinked above the counter. Hidden camera. Recording everything. Marcus tapped the screen. You broke into my house, threatened me, and tried to plant forged documents. That's enough for a felony charge. Her voice broke for the first time. Please, don't do this. He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, not with anger, but something deeper. Pity. You could have just walked away, Karen, he said softly. You could have started over, but you came back for a fight that was already over. Tears filled her eyes, but pride wouldn't let them fall. You took everything from me, she whispered. No, he said quietly. You gave it away. The front door opened suddenly. Flashlights, voices. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Karen spun around, panic flooding her face. Wait, no, this isn't. One officer raised a hand. Ma'am, step away from the counter. Marcus spoke evenly. She broke in. The whole thing's on camera. Karen turned to him, trembling. Marcus, please, don't do this. I was just trying to make things right. He sighed. You can't fix control with more control. You fix it with humility. The cuffs clicked around her wrists. She closed her eyes, her once browed shoulders slumping. The officers led her toward the door. Outside, the same neighbors she once ruled stood on their porches, watching in stunned silence. One whispered, "Is that Karen?" Another replied, "Finally." As she was placed into the back of the patrol car, the lights flashed red and blue across her face, the same colors she once used to threaten others with HOA enforcement. The irony wasn't lost on her. Marcus stood by the door, watching as the car rolled away. A gust of wind fluttered one of the papers left on the counter, a property map with Karen's signature at the bottom. He picked it up, folded it carefully, and whispered, "Some people only see the truth when the lights finally hit them." He looked at the street, once more neighbors gathering, whispering, "Free again." Then he closed the door. Peace at last. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, soft and golden, the kind of morning that usually feels like peace. But for Marcus, peace always came with an edge. Years as a detective had taught him that when things seemed too quiet, something was always waiting beneath the surface. He brewed his coffee, the sound of the machine filling the silence. The air smelled like calm, but his instincts whispered otherwise. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate raps. He frowned at this hour. He walked to the door, cup still in hand, and opened it. A mail courier stood there, holding a large brown envelope. Delivery for Marcus Green. The man said, scanning a clipboard. Marcus nodded. That's me. The courier handed it over and left without another word. The envelope was heavy, too heavy for regular mail. On the front, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Confidential HOA records for your eyes." Only. His brow furrowed. He'd already seen all the HOA files when he took over as landlord. So what was this? He carried it to the dining table, slit the seal open, and poured out the contents. Stacks of documents spilled across the wood-printed emails, meeting notes, bank ledgers, and on top, one photo that made his pulse skip. Karen, standing beside a man in a navy suit, the same man who had run the auction. Marcus froze. No way. He muttered. He flipped through the papers faster now. Hidden transactions, wire transfers, meeting logs. It wasn't just Karen. There were others' names he recognized from the HOA board. 2 of them still held positions of power in other neighborhoods across the county. It wasn't just corruption. It was a system. He leaned back, exhaling. This goes way deeper than I thought. And then, at the bottom of the pile, he saw something that chilled him. A letter, handwritten in shaky pen. Marcus, if you're reading this, it means they're already watching you. You think you won because Karen got arrested, but she was only the face. We were all just following orders. Someone higher controls everything, every HOA, every property transfer, every neighborhood auction. The man in the blue suit, he isn't who you think he is, and if you dig any deeper, they'll come for you too. I'm sorry for what we did, but you're in danger now. A friend from the inside. Marcus's fingers tightened around the paper. He looked out the window across the clean, peaceful neighborhood, and for the first time, it didn't look safe anymore. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "Hey, Tom, it's Marcus. I need a favor." His old partner's voice crackled through. "You sound serious." "I am. I need you to pull financials on a man named Daniel Holt. Worked the last HOA property auction." Tom whistled. "You still chasing HOA crooks? Thought you were retired." "Yeah, so did I," Marcus said quietly. "But this one's different. This isn't about Karen anymore. It's about control, big control." As he hung up, a car rolled slowly past the house, black SUV, windows tinted too dark for daylight. It crawled to a stop for just a second, long enough for Marcus to notice the plate wasn't local. Then it drove off. He stood still, tension rising in his chest. His gut told him that this wasn't random. Someone was keeping tabs on him. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every small sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the wood, felt magnified. Then came the vibration of his phone on the nightstand. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A distorted voice came through. "You should have stopped after Karen." Marcus sat upright. "Who is this?" "Walk away, Detective Green," the voice said. "You don't know what you're up against." The line went dead. He sat there in the dark, phone still in his hand, heartbeat steady but hard. The detective inside him had woken up again. Whoever was behind this had just made a mistake, threatening the wrong man. The next morning, Marcus visited the county courthouse. He flashed his credentials to the clerk, even though he wasn't active duty anymore. "I need the complete auction file for Oak Ridge Estates," he said. The clerk hesitated. "That's restricted, sir." Marcus leaned in. "Not to me, it isn't." After a moment, she disappeared and returned with a sealed binder. "Someone already requested this last week," she said. He frowned. "Who?" She glanced nervously at the logbook. "A woman. Didn't give her real name. Just said she represented the HOA legal team." Marcus's stomach tightened. Karen was in custody, so who else was working behind the scenes? He opened the binder, scanning through until he found what he was looking for, the property chain, and there it was. Owner before auction, Holt and Associates, transferee, Karen Parker, temporary custodian. Final buyer, Marcus Green, but under that written faintly in pencil a note. Transfer overseen by D.H., keep off record. D.H. Daniel Holt. He wasn't just an auction official. He was the architect of the entire network. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He needed to find Holt before Holt found him. That evening, Marcus drove across town to an old office park, the address listed on the auction forms. The building was half empty, windows boarded, lights flickering inside. A faded sign read Holt Realty and Property Group. He pushed open the glass door. It creaked like it hadn't moved in months. Inside, silence. Dust floated in the shafts of light cutting through the blinds. He walked toward the back office, following faint footprints in the dust. Then he heard it. A click, metal against metal. He froze. Detective Green. A voice called from the shadows. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Marcus turned slowly. Holt stood there, older, lean, calm, a gun aimed straight at him. "You bought a house that wasn't supposed to sell," Holt said. "You interfered with a system you don't understand." Marcus didn't flinch. "A system that profits off people losing their homes. I understand it just fine." Holt smirked. "You're just one man." "Yeah," Marcus said, stepping forward slightly, "but one man with a badge, a camera, and evidence that can burn your empire down." Holt's smirk faltered for the first time. "You don't scare me," Marcus said quietly. "You just reminded me why I never stopped digging." In one swift move, Marcus flicked his wrist, knocking the gun aside. The shot went wide, slamming into the wall. They struggled, fists, elbows, the sound of shattering glass echoing through the office. Finally, Holt stumbled back, hitting the desk hard. Marcus pinned him down, breathing heavy. "It's over," he said. Outside, sirens wailed. Tom's car screeched to a stop. Officers stormed in seconds later. "Marcus, you all right?" Tom shouted. "Yeah," Marcus said, cuffing Holt's hands himself. "Let's just say the HOA finally met someone they couldn't find." As Holt was dragged out, Marcus picked up the fallen folder labeled Neighborhood Project. Expansion Plan Phase 2. He opened it. Inside were maps of nearby neighborhoods, hundreds of them, each one marked with red circles. "This wasn't just Oak Ridge," Marcus whispered. "It's everywhere." Tom looked over his shoulder. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Marcus nodded slowly. "We're not done, not yet." He looked out the cracked window at the city lights flickering in the distance, every light representing a home, a family, a story. And somewhere out there, more people were still trapped under the same invisible chains he'd just broken. He straightened his jacket, walked toward the door, and said quietly, "Let's clean up the rest of this mess." Fade out, but not the end.